Speaking of the good times in Disney, it seems like a lifetime ago the country was appalled at the sight of kids in cages at the border. Torn from family and kept in horrid conditions we would only imagine in horror films, the Donald Trump border policy went even further than the savagery of the Obama and Clinton presidencies. Sadly, not much has changed under the Biden administration. From an article in the LA Times, at least 38, now as many as 40 migrants were killed and dozens more were injured Monday night in the blaze at a National Migration Institute lockup in Juarez, Mexico, just south of the U.S. border, according to authorities. It was the deadliest incident in recent memory at Mexico's notoriously crowded immigration holding centers and another reminder of the many perils faced by migrants trying to reach the United States. Sadly, the deaths could have been avoided as there is footage of guards witnessing the flames and fleeing the scene. More from the article. According to the Mexican Attorney General's office, the dead and injured included 28 Guatemalans, 13 Hondurans, 12 Salvadorians, 12 Venezuelans, and one citizen each from Colombia and Ecuador. It is unclear whether some of the migrants had been previously deported from the United States. In recent months, northern Mexican cities have been overwhelmed as a result of recent Biden administration policies that limit the ability of migrants from four countries, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Cuba, to seek asylum at the border without first making an appointment via a smartphone application. The system has been riddled with glitches and offers limited appointments, which fill up within minutes. Some migrants have waited months at the border. Tensions have been particularly high in Juarez, where shelters housing people hoping to cross the United States are overflowing, and stranded migrants have been asking for food and money in major intersections and sleeping on the sidewalk near border crossings in into El Paso, sorry. We have exceeded our capacity to provide attention, says Miguel Angel Gonzalez, president of a church-based network of shelters in Juarez. He said his network's 15 shelters have been completely full for the last 6 months. City officials have publicly criticized the migrants, with Juarez Mayor Cruz Perez Cuellar recently imploring residents to not give migrants money, insisting that they can find work. In a March 9th letter, several dozen migrant advocacy groups urged the city to investigate abuses by police and immigration officials. They said that during arbitrary detentions, officials have questioned migrants about their legal status, extorted and stolen money from them, and destroyed their documents. The letter described an incident in early March in which they said police violently and arbitrarily detained migrants in a downtown cathedral, as well as another incident the following week in which members of the Army, the National Guard, and the city police swarmed a hotel where migrants were staying, sending a clear message of intimidation. The Trump presidency was chock full filled of scandal and bumbling, but one of the things that people hoped for with with Trump out of office was legislation with civility. The Biden administration hasn't done much to change the Trump era immigration. Should we really be surprised by that? Because the cages that these kids were put in, that we found so abhorrent, were an Obama era construction. So what is going on at the Mexican border? Why are so many people fleeing some of these countries knowing the consequences? We don't have the answers to these questions, but we know someone who can provide some much needed insight and context. Please welcome friend of show and one of the sometimes wise of TRI, Camilo Gomez.
Hi. It is a pleasure being with you all.
How are you?
It's been a very intense times here in Peru and in Latin America in itself. I will say that it's very important what you mentioned about Obama being behind a lot of the kind of reaction to kind of reactionary border policies, because I feel that the what sometimes people miss is that the anti-immigration policies are kind of multi-partisan. Like it
Yes.
in Argentina, for example, like the Socialist Party, which is not part of the Peronist, so it's the independent. Although now they are united with the right, it's kind of very
The Socialist
Strange.
Party in Argentina is
Yeah,
united with the right.
yes, but before, when they were kind of independent, they also kind of blame a lot of problems, particularly in the northern province where they govern, to the Paraguayan immigrants, and also the part of the more traditional Chilean center left has in the past accused the Haitians of causing troubles, and in much more recent times, Boric also has made kind of anti-immigrant statements, even if is slightly more careful in his language than the normal politicians. But it is kind of a systemic problem in the in the region, because the the political crisis, economic crisis, and different kind of, of, of of problems and instability have generated like historic waves of immigration. In many ways, Argentina was an early receptor of many waves of immigrants. At one point, it had a significant um, Peruvian diaspora, for example. Like a lot of Peruvians were in Argentina in the economic crisis of the 80s, of the 90s. Also, the political violence that was in the country led to a lot of Peruvians moving to Argentina. But in more recent times, a lot have left, because also the economic conditions there became much more meager. So the same happened with Bolivians. Also, many Bolivians had migrated to Argentina, and then returned. With Paraguayans, slightly different, because um, in some ways, like even if Paraguay is slightly more stable, it's kind of many of the immigrants from Paraguay have already settled in Paraguay and Argentina, and so it's a bit different. But there were also other poles of immigration like Chile, uh, and to some degree also Brazil, and Mexico. So there were a lot of countries, and obviously Dominican Republic for Haitians, that was also a country. But there has been a lot of efforts from different governments to try to stop it. To be honest, in Argentina, like despite some of the rhetoric, there have been like not much like strong efforts in from the part of the government. Just that the economic situation became so unstable, particularly with inflation, that is kind of making life very difficult, because it's very difficult to particularly for informal workers to know how much money they are going to need to survive at the end of the month. Uh, so the a lot of the situation that has happened in Latin America was that the Venezuelan immigration crisis that was very huge. In some ways, what had a much more soft landing, to say in some way, toward the U.S., in the sense that a lot of Venezuelans immigrated to Colombia and to Peru, to Ecuador, to neighboring countries, also Brazil, to some degree even Argentina, um, Panama, also a bit to Mexico. It was very small, the number that, at least in the beginning of the Venezuelan immigration crisis, went to the U.S. Even some went to Europe. Some countries were
Didn't most
relatively.
of them go to Colombia?
Yes, most went to Colombia. Was it's the country with the very high like historical points in common. Like it has a large border. It has a large border towns like that are quite integrated. So that was the main source where Venezuelans went.
Mm,
But the problem started with the kind of the effect of the kind of economic boom, in some ways, of resource materials from the odds that still survived to the 2010s, started fading away. Like it was a number that started to increase, of Venezuelan immigrants going toward Mexico, toward the US via Mexico. So
mm,
that started increasing. Also, with the more less favorable policies in Chile, also many Haitians decided to head to the U.S. Also, that's some things that are not much reported. And also, there are Chinese citizens that are trying to cross the border. So they came sometimes to Ecuador or Colombia or Panama, and they also do the crossing with the rest of Latin Americans. Also, some Indians, some Africans. So it is not just Latin Americans, also Cubans. So it is a wider range
The-
of
yeah, there
of
there was
yeah.